Hello, good morning. Welcome back. We're going to be doing part two here. All right, we're going to be doing a tic-tac-toe game. All right. Hopefully you watched the first part. The first part we set up our virtual machine. All right. Remember, the one I'm using is an Ubuntu machine, so we use some Linux commands, cd, make directory, that kind of stuff. We initialized our GitHub repository. We actually installed Bower, initialized our Bower with a JSON file. And then we set up our file structure. So now we're ready to progress with our project. So we're going to do the HTML portion today. All right. So let's get started here. I'm going to share my screen with you all so you can see what I'm doing. And where I want to start here is I want to start in our file structure itself. So we're always going to start off. I have my HTML document open here, as you can see. And we know that this is going to be an HTML document. And see, I just start typing HTML and I hit the tab key, and then it automatically opens this stuff up for me, which is a reason that I really like using these IDEs rather than working in like CodePen or something, because it has all these built-in shortcuts. The next thing that we're going to need to do is let's put a title, what shows up at the top here. So if I start typing in a, say, title, not working out so well today, huh? No, start typing in a title here. And see, as soon as I finish title, it automatically populates there. And I want my page to be called Tic Tac Go. Alrighty, so there we go. So I have a title. Now, the next thing that I need inside my title, after my title rather, is going to be a head. Okay, so, well, you know what? Let's put the title inside the head, actually. Let's do it. Go ahead and do that. Let's go head. Make sure I put the title in the head. There we go. All right, so we have a head. Head is all the data, everything that goes before your page actually starts, okay? So what I need to do up here is I need to make sure I link all of the other file structure. So when the browser goes and reads my index file, it knows to also go access my file structure and make sure that I'm using Font Awesome and Bootstrap and jQuery and the CSS file that I write and the JavaScript file that I write. So I'm going to need all of these things in order to make this game. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to start typing in link. And here's your link snippet. All right. And so you have a link and it has a relative. It's going to be a style sheet. All right. And so that style sheet, let's call this, let's make this our CSS file. Now the load order matters. So the order of your links up here is going to matter what loads first. So if you want to load your entire web page and then load your other libraries and then load your custom styles, you might actually see something happen. You might see the image like readjust as the page goes and loads depending on the speed of your browser. All right, so the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to actually import first the CSS file and then all the other CSS files like Font Awesome and Bootstrap. And then I'm going to go ahead and load jQuery. And then last thing I'm going to load is my index.js file because that's going to be using jQuery. So let's start off with finding this index.css file. We already know that we're in our home directory. So any links that we put in here need to be from our home directory. And here you can see our directory tree here. And I want to find my index.css. So that's going to be in CSS index.css. So how do we write that? We just simply type inside these quotes CSS/index.css. Okay, and that tells it to go to CSS and then inside of that folder. Okay, all right, it's pretty simple. It's a simple CSS document. The next thing I'm going to do is load another link. The next link that I need to do is let's go and find, now we're going to be in Bower, and we're going to need these three. Now notice that this isn't a link. This is actually going to be a script, okay, because it's a JavaScript stuff in there. All right, so let's start with Bootstrap here. So we need to find Bootstrap All right. And then we need to go inside of the distribution folder. And then after the distribution folder, I want to find the CSS file. And I'm going to slide this over so you can see. And we're going to grab bootstrap.min.css. Min means minified, the minified version. It's just the CSS file that has everything that is scrunched together rather than all spread out nicely and ready to read. So it makes it easier to load. That's all. All right, so now we have to go and mimic that whole file structure here. So how do we do that? Well, we first start off in bower_components. Our components. Then we have /bootstrap. All right. Then we have DST in the distribution folder. Then we have the CSS folder. And then we have the file name. So bootstrap.in.css. All right. That was a long one. All right, that was a long one. So we have Bower components, Bootstrap, distribution, CSS, bootstrap.minify.css. Good. So there's our Bootstrap. And now I'm going to go in and put another link in. So I'm going to close the Bootstrap. And let's find the link to the Font Awesome. So we have Font Awesome. Font Awesome goes directly into CSS. And then look, fontawesome.minify.css. This one's a little bit easier. So we can go into our components. Oops. If I was typing where I need to type. All right, so Bower, oh look, Bower components, remember stuff for me, which is nice. /font awesome. All right, font dash awesome /CSS /font awesome .min.css. Okay. And so now I have the CSS files done. They're set up as links. So I have my CSS file, Font Awesome, and Bootstrap loaded in. Now, next thing I want to do is I want to make sure that I load jQuery next. So after I have everything looking right, the next thing I want to do is make sure I get everything functioning correctly. So I'm going to grab this script snippet, and the script snippet is going to work the same way. So I'm going to close Font Awesome, and I want to grab jQuery. So jQuery is going to be this jQuery, and in the distribution folder, there is a jQuery.min.js. Notice it's a .js file, not a CSS file. Therefore, it is a type of script that we need to load. So again, we're going to start off in here with our components again /jQuery /dst /jQuery.min.js. All right, so there's jQuery loaded. All right, and then the last thing that I need to load is I need to remember to load my actual JavaScript file. I'm going to load that last. So first we make sure everything looks good. Then I have everything that I need for my JavaScript file. And then I can actually use my JavaScript file, which is much simpler. It is just under js/index.js. Whew. All right. There we go. So I have the heading done. I have the title in the head correctly this time. Then I have all of my CSS files linked. Then I've got my scripts linked, including jQuery is a script, because it's a JavaScript file, and then also my JavaScript file that I'm going to be linking to. Good to go. Now, what can we do next? Well, next, let's go ahead and let's get started on the body. All right, the body. Actually, I can delete all this space. I don't need this space. Delete. Let's get started on the body here. Inside of this body, if you've watched my other videos, I do like to put a div in here. And that div, I'm going to give a class. All right, I'm going to set that class equal to spacer. What I do with these div class spacer, um, the reason I do this is because I just like to have a help if it was inside the div, right? Sorry about that. I'm looking at my notes here as I'm going ahead and doing this. Spacer. So I have a spacer class, which is going to be a custom CSS class, which gives me a certain percentage of the screen so I can adjust my sizes depending on my project. Just makes it easier for me because I know I'm going to have that. And then in that top spacer, I'm also going to just happen to put Tic Tac. Okay. And if you want to preview your file to see what we have so far, you can kind of see we don't have a whole lot going on, right? So I just have a spacer in there, and that spacer should have tic-tac-toe, and it's not showing up. Let's see. Control S, reload. There we go. Make sure you save before you reload, and you can just see I have a spacer right here that's not defined with any kind of style, and it has tic-tac-toe. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move this over here. So we'll just bounce between it. So I save some space. All right, so I'm going to be using that specifically as a spacer from the top, and that's also going to have the main title in it. All right, and then the next thing we're going to be doing is I'm just going to have a game board. All right, so I'm going to call this a game board, and that game board is going to be a 3x3 grid. And all that's going to be is just another div, right? So here I have a div. Sorry about that. Here I have another div. And this div itself is going to be the entire game board, right? So everything is going to go in there. So I need to give this a class, make sure it's in here. So class equals game board. And I'm also going to give it an ID of game board as well, because I'm going to be controlling things differently as well. So ID equals now you can target IDs and classes, and you can set up classes or IDs in your CSS or JavaScript. I'm going to leave both in here, and I'm going to come back to this later and how we're going to be using this. So this div here is our game board itself. So this is basically it. So we have a spacer at the top, and then we have a game board. All right. And that's pretty much what we have here. All right. So let's see what else we can put in there. What I want to do is after this game board, I'm not going to set up the game board quite yet. I want to go in here in the bottom, and I want to put a another div in here. 2 more divs in there. And so here is where we're going to say player 1 has won the game. Okay, so that's going to be what happens if you win. All right. Now, in order to do this, I'm going to have to add some classes and some IDs to this as well, right? So I'm going to go in here and put another div in, and then I'm going to show you, well, you know what? I'm going to leave it like this because they're going to be the same exact things, actually. I'll show you what I mean, so I just copy and paste it, just easier. All right, so let's go ahead and let's add some classes to this. So the class in this is going to equal, I'm going to use some Bootstrap classes. So column, medium, 12. I want the text to be centered, right? So text. And I could target this separately and then do a separate assignment in CSS, or you could do it right here. Like text center, I could just do that in CSS, but it's easier just to stick it here because I only really need a few things. And so it's easy enough just to type this in. All right. And then I need to give this an ID because I'm actually going to hide this. I'm only going to just reveal this div if the player has won the game. It's a little easier this way. And then the ID, I'm going to set the ID equal to win. And the reason I did this is so I can actually Control C, Control V, and here instead of win, I'm going to call my computer Hal. So I'm going to give that the ID of Hal. All right, if you know what Hal has won. Maybe a I don't know, sad emoji face. All right, and I'll save this. Control save over my index, and you can kind of see what the player will see. I haven't styled the text, so if the computer wins, it'll show Hal has won. Otherwise, I'll say player 1 has won the game. Ta-da! All right. And obviously, when I first load the page, I'm going to make sure when I first load my script, I'm going to hide these parts right here. All right, so let's go inside the game board. Now, the game board itself is going to be really simple. All right, I'm going to have a row, and each row is going to have 3 divs in it, right? So I have a div class row. So I'm going to have a div, all right, here. And this div itself is going to have a class equal to row. And again, this is a Bootstrap class. And since we have Bootstrap, we can use this, right? And then in this row, I want to have 3 divs, okay? So it's just going to be div, all right? And this div here is going to be simple. I'm going to give it a class. And this class, I'm going to call square. And this square class is going to be the same for all of my squares, my grid squares, essentially, right? And then I'm also going to add a secondary class. And this secondary class is going to be unique. So it's going to be a unique class to each individual square. So the reason I'm doing this is so I can actually identify which square has an X and which square has an O when I do my JavaScript later. So I'm just going to call this SQ1. All right? And this is going to be pretty simple. I'm going to take this. So I have 1 square, V, Control V, and I'm just going to count, all right? So square 2, square 3. All right, so here I have a game board, then I have a div class row, so that's the first row. Remember, I need 9 squares, so I'm going to copy this, paste it. That's 6, paste it. Now I have a 9 by 9 grid. Now the problem is I need to make sure these are all the same, so I don't want the same 1, 2, 3 here. I want this one to be 4, 5, 6, then 7, 8, 9. So here I have a common thing right here for square. All right, so square is going to be a common class, and then they're going to have their each individual class that I can control. So now I can control them individually, but I can style them all the same. All right. So what else do we want? Let's see here. Do we want the text when we win? Let me Control save, load. All right. And as we reload, you notice that nothing happens. Why does nothing happen? Well, there's nothing inside of these divs yet. All right, I didn't set these divs to anything yet, and there's nothing inside of them. All right, I'm going to do all of this with some CSS as well. So you don't really have to worry about this right now. But I'm going to need a few other things. So I'm almost done. Let's take a look at this. If I have my index, so you can see that once I do have my grid, this text is actually going to be touching the bottom of that grid right there. I don't really want that. I want to have another spacer here. So let's just put in at the end of this div. Let's see here. Let's make a spacer. Yeah, let's put another div class spacer in here. Class equals spacer. I'll put a spacer there. What else do we need? Let's put a reload button too. So we'll hide a reload button. So a spacer, and then it'll say reload, and then it'll have who has won the game. Let's do that. So let's put another div in here. Final div. All right, and this div is just going to have the text. Well, I don't want the text there. I'm actually going to put the text inside of something else. I'll show you what I'm going to do in a second. So let's put a class on this. And that class I'm going to set equal to another. I want it to be in the center, right? So I'm just going to use Bootstrap, column, medium, 12. And then I'll just make this text center while I'm here. Not center, but center. Text center there. And again, you can do this in, give it an ID and then do it in your CSS file if you want. All right. You don't have to do it this way. I'm going to give this an ID. ID is going to be equal to, we'll call it reload. Yeah, reload. That sounds good, right? And then inside of this, okay, so now you're inside of the div. All right, so inside the div, I want to place an anchor tag, okay? So I want to place an anchor tag. You notice that it has an anchor tag. And inside that anchor tag now, I want to hit reload, question mark. All right, so I'm going to have an anchor tag that says reload game. And I'm going to be controlling this. And I want to make sure that this anchor tag, all right, is an actual button. So when you have an anchor tag, you're going to have an href, right? And I'm going to set that equal to blank because I don't really need anything. I'm just going to use it to reload the page. That's all. And I'm going to give this a class. And what do I want this button class to be? Well, I'm going to use Bootstrap, right? Because Bootstrap is easy. So btn, we'll go with btn primary, btn primary, btn primary, and let's make it large. btn LG for large. And those are all Bootstrap classes, okay? And there we go. And you can kind of see how that finishes off. So I have a div. So the div itself is going to be centered, and the text is going to be centered. I'm going to call it reload so I can hide it. So I'm going to hide reload, hide win, hide hal at the beginning. And inside of that div with the button in the center, it's going to have a button that doesn't really do anything right now until I add some JavaScript, and what it's going to have is a button primary, and button large. All right, and then I can control this and modify this with some more CSS. All right, so that about does it. That is our entire not a JavaScript, our HTML file. But if I save it, go here, reload, you can see that I have all of this stuff ready to go, and there's my button to reload the game. And it rolls over, it's animated, it's ready to go. You can see Hal has won, or player one has won, and it has Tic Tac Toe labeled up here, and it doesn't really have any sort of style or anything like that. So I'm going to change that, obviously, when we go ahead and do our CSS next time. Alrighty, so that does it for today, and I hope that was helpful to you all, and I will see you all next time.